everybody. Welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. Noel Manning II here, hanging out with all sorts of craziness and chaos. And actually today, you know what? Greg Tillman. It is actually just Greg Tillman today.
Wow.
No special guest. I didn't do my research, and so it's just Greg Tillman. Sorry.
It's okay, but I'm not crazy about my name being out
Not
there.
Jimmy Hoffa.
No, it's Dolomite.
Oh, okay.
He's here a week early. It's Dolomite. He's back. And
I need to work on my profanity if I want
That's
to do
exactly
that.
right. Yeah, we're going to make sure
That'll
that
be my weekend project to perfect
bleep,
profanity.
bleep.
Yeah.
So if you hear a lot of bleeps, you know Dolomite is in action.
Maybe in the show, who knows?
Who knows? Greg Tillman, he is the guru and the king of all that is
Wow.
C19
Holy
TV.
cow.
Thomas Manning over here
Do I
beside
get the
me.
credit or the blame for that?
We'll let our viewers make that decision. We'll let our viewers make that decision. Thomas Manning over here, sporting his Quentin Tarantino shirt, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So good to see that, man.
Yeah.
And on the back, I think it says the New Beverly. So
New Beverly, 35 millimeter.
35 millimeter.
Yeah.
So welcome. Good to see you.
Souvenir.
Glad you're here. Yes, souvenir from Hollywood.
So you go to Hollywood and he gets, well, all he brings
It's
is
a
a lousy
crappy
t-shirt.
t-shirt.
It's a pretty decent t-shirt. Yeah. I mean, he's taking me in January, so we're good.
That's true. Yeah, and I did bring some gag gifts. I did bring a roll of toilet paper from the Four Seasons just to see if it was any different.
You stole a roll of toilet paper
No,
from
I didn't steal it. It was there.
It's complimentary.
It was complimentary. Four
my,
Seasons.
You know, my phone is over there. Does that mean you, whatever.
Well,
you have to live with it.
Well, welcome to the show. We do talk movies, and we've got a lot to talk about today, including a movie called The Irishman. But before we get to that review, we're going to do some viewer mail. This is not non-viewer mail. This is actually viewer mail.
No kidding.
Yeah, this came. We posted these on YouTube, and these were actually YouTube. And of course, most of the viewer mail we get is because we mess something up, you know, or get something wrong. And so both of these were calling us out, and I appreciate it. The first one comes from SoCali. SoCali is his name, so if you want to find SoCali on YouTube, you can. We talked about The Departed. We did the Take 5 last week, and we said The Departed, and I called it a remake of a Hong Kong film called Internal Affairs. But he reminded me it was called Infernal Affairs, and he is absolutely right. That was a slip of a tongue. So thank you to SoCali on that. I appreciate that. And also, Simon Says TV on YouTube talked about, we were talking about Pacino and De Niro, and about films that, you know, how many films have they been in together, and we were kind of talking about that, and thinking through that. And he reminded me that one from 2008 called Righteous Kill had both of them in it for the whole film. It was kind of a crime drama, and the reason I forgot about it because it was not a great film.
I was going to say, I'm not even familiar with the title.
Righteous Kill, and if we get to it, I will give a review from the vault on that. So I wanted to go back and visit just to see if I remembered it as poorly as I did the first time. So I've already told you that it wasn't a great film, so I've given away the spoiler there. So
I don't know, you could have changed. You
maybe.
know,
Yeah, and maybe
like
by the time...
Like you say, when you see a film, part of it is the baggage that you're taking in with you, the mood that you're in, your expectations.
Yeah, and maybe by the time we get to it in about 10, 15 minutes, maybe my view will change more.
I'm guessing it hasn't.
Well, The Irishman does star Pacino. It stars De Niro. It's a Scorsese film. Stars Joe Pesci, Ray Romano. I mean,
Harvey Keitel.
Harvey Keitel. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And this is a true mob film in every form and fashion. You got three lead characters, and they're all a bit different. One is kind of this quiet leader. Joe Pesci is kind of behind the scenes, but he's the mob boss. You've got De Niro, and De Niro's character, he's the hired gunman, or hired for whatever the needs are.
He paints houses.
He paints houses. He truly does paint houses, and there's a theme song that's attached to that. And Pacino stars as Jimmy Hoffa. And it's the story of these three men and their connections to each other through multiple decades. I can't tell if it's 30, 40, or 50 years, but multiple decades. And so when you see them on film, you're going to see makeup and wardrobe differences throughout the years and the decades, but also you're going to see some de-aging that's done with CGI. Thomas, give me some of your thoughts on this film, or if there's anything else you want to add about the story that you think people need to know about.
So it is adapted from basically a novel memoir from the title character, The Irishman. And there's controversy over how much of this is true, how much of this is just kind of over-exaggerated fantasy, but that just kind of adds to the intrigue of it all. Like, you think Scorsese has told every mob story in the book, but then now he actually has this really rich source material to draw from, and the way he's able to continue to craft and concoct new narratives, it just blows my mind. And the fact that a lot of this is true is just all the more astounding.
It is amazing. Scorsese, we talked last week, no stranger to this kind of subject matter.
No.
You know, he's been there, he's done that, and you're like, how can he do anything else and make it good? And I got to tell you, in watching this film, if this were the last film for any of these, I would say that they go out on top, because this is such a solid film on so many different levels. 3.5 hours long. It is a long film, no intermission. We kind of mentioned that last week, but you got a chance to do an early screening of this as well. It's a film that on every technical level, from cinematography to sound design to the use of score by Robbie Robertson, who many will know from The Band. Right. You know, he was the music supervisor for this. It's so solid, and there was nothing I could find wrong about this technically. Everything was almost to perfection.
Yeah, I mean, even when you look at the de-aging, the first scene, it goes straight from like De Niro in this old, basically present day, straight back to like the 40s. And at first, it is a bit jarring. It takes just a minute to get used to. But then after the first 5 minutes or so, you just are so engrossed in the narrative and the story and everything that's going on with this character that you really don't care at all. It's just, and I do think it is a lot more impressive de-aging than what we have seen in other films in the past few years.
Well, even the last few months. If you think about Gemini Man.
Yeah.
I mean, this is much better than what we saw in Gemini Man. It's the de-aging with using computers, Greg. It's still not perfected. Mm-hmm. They still, you know, if you're watching a non-human character, if it's some kind of monster or something, it doesn't.
Kind of like Tim.
Yeah, if it's like Tim or Derek back there on the Tim Cam, you know, or Elvis Holmesley, it's okay. You know, it's okay because it's not human. But if it's human, there are certain expectations we have for it, and they still have not quite perfected the mouth and the eyelids. That's where they still kind of limit, and still need some work.
But I did think right here it was one of the most consistent like de-aging effects that I've ever seen, and like I said, you just don't even think about it after a while because the story is so rich and so layered, so nuanced. It's almost impossible to just sum it all up and just, like, if I were to write a review about it, I would have to write an entire essay.
Absolutely.
Just because there are so many things that are going on. You know, some political and social commentary, like religious metaphor, and the struggles of these characters with their faith and with their religion, struggles with their familial lives and relationships with people around them. It's just so much to absorb and take in that you're just entranced the entire time.
Go ahead.
Martin Scorsese's made so many incredibly good films over the past almost 40 years.
Yeah.
Would you consider this his best?
I would say top 3.
I would say it's one of his best.
Yeah.
It's if he had never made a film before this, this would have been
Hands
the
down.
masterpiece.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I mentioned it last week, or maybe I did, but this is the masterpiece of a film that any filmmaker would want to have in their in their portfolio.
Sure.
It is that good. The story is so solid, and it is a film that I think to really appreciate it completely, you want to watch it more than once. Because there's so much going on. You talk about the layers. There are so many different layers. Yeah. And Joe Pesci's character just blew me away. You know, he was this character that just had. He really, he was not a good guy.
Yeah.
But he wanted to connect with everybody, and he wanted to be loved.
Yeah.
And he really sold it. And Joe Pesci just really, really blew me away on this. I love this movie. I think there were maybe a handful of scenes that could have been cut down just a little bit, but not a ton. And the CGI, with it not being completely perfect, you know, I'm going to give him a pass on that. But and it was also Scorsese's first attempt at doing anything with CGI.
Yeah.
So, other thoughts?
So Thelma Schoonmaker, who's the editor, she's been with Scorsese since the very beginning, since 1967. Who's That Knocking at My Door, which was also Harvey Keitel's debut. And so it's coming full circle 52 years later, and here they are. And she probably is the best editor of all time that we've ever seen. The way that she is able to navigate the pacing is unlike anything you've seen before. And I mean, there are some times you feel the length of it. It is a 3.5 hour long movie, but I think it's probably the most coherent 3.5 hour movie I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
And it's like you're not bored. You're just kind of, you're supposed to meditate on what's happening and supposed to think about it. And I really think Scorsese was kind of examining his life and his career through these characters, through each character, Pesci, Pacino, and De Niro, in different ways.
I agree, and I don't think that there were wasted scenes. I just felt that there were a few scenes that could have been cut down a little bit. But an amazing film. I'm glad I got a chance to see it, and I will watch it again. November 27th is when it's released on Netflix at home. Everybody can check it out.
Thanksgiving, I think.
Yeah. And it is available in select theaters as well. What's your rating for this?
A+.
Okay.
I don't get those out very often, but this one, even little nitpicks can't bring it down for me. It was just really a masterpiece.
Yeah, mine's right there on the edge between an A and an A+.
Yeah.
And so I'll let Greg make the decision on which of those two it would go. So.
Well, the sense of responsibility I have. So I think Thomas kind of answered the question I had, is did it feel long? 3.5 hours is a long time for a film.
Yeah, and it didn't. Well, you know, I was sitting.
I've sat through 2-hour movies that felt longer than this.
Oh yeah. And I sat through Righteous Kill, which the first 20 minutes felt longer than the 3.5 hours.
Yeah, you're not going to change your review of that, are you?
No, but it is one of the best films of 2019. And decades from now, when we talk about gangster films, this will be one that's at the top of the list that people will talk about, or they should.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's go to a review from the vault. We'll talk about Righteous Kill really quickly.
Did you like that one, Noel?
The movie does go back to 2008, and this is De Niro and Pacino together. It really, honestly, it's a paint-by-numbers mystery crime thriller. Pacino and De Niro are in this film, and they are good in it. But the story is just so bad. You know, the best thing about the movie is seeing these two together. That was really it. Even revisiting it. Really poorly executed script, subpar acting from the supporting cast, and the pacing was absolutely horrible. And I'm not kidding. 20 minutes in, I really was like, golly, you know, I'm sure I've been watching about an hour, and it was 20 minutes. I said, wow, I've got to endure another, you know, hour and a half of this. C-, and the only reason it didn't get a D was because it was just great to see Pacino and De Niro, but I do not recommend Righteous Kill. I will recommend another De Niro and Pacino film, and we're going to come back to that right after the break, and the movie's called Heat, that was done just quite a few years earlier, and so maybe they were trying to reconnect with that Heat thing, but it just didn't work for Righteous Kill. Any other thoughts or comments before we go to a break?
Can't wait to see it.
All right.
That's all I got.
Which
Tim?
one? Which one?
Which one?
Oh, Righteous Kill.
Righteous Kill, absolutely. Yeah, all right.
I think I'll
Tim,
try the Irishman first.
Hey, Tim, play us some kind of Irish jig music going to the intermission.
Better yet,
just
dance
so
in Irish.
Yeah, just so we can
Derek
see
can do
Derek
that.
dance. There we go. It's river dancing back there on the Tim Canal. We'll be right back after this break.
Hey Jen, does your home have natural gas from the city of Shelby?
I'm not sure, Chris. You do realize I'm just a kid, right?
Right, you're what, like 6 years old now?
6.5, Chris.
Okay, well did you know that the city of Shelby's been providing natural gas to homes in Cleveland County since?
1955. Yeah, I knew that.
You also know that natural gas is...
Safe.
Yeah, did you know natural gas is...
Affordable. Yeah, I knew that too.
Wow, you sure know an awful lot about natural gas to be a kid.
Hey, I may be a kid, but I'm pretty smart to be.
6 years old?
6.5, Chris.
For more information on the benefits of natural gas, visit cityofshelby.com and discover all the ways natural gas is working for you today.
Safe, affordable natural gas from the city of Shelby, making the
way we live even better.
You have got to stop doing that.
Hi, I'm Shara Miller, the host of Artworks. Each month we bring to you wonderful, talented artists from here in Cleveland County and the region. We have artists, we have potters, we have painters, we have musicians, we have actors. We just have wonderful artists that come to you and tell you about all that they're doing, their creativity, what inspires them. Join me here on Artworks each month on C19. You can also watch us online at C19 TV.
They're gonna put me in the movies. They're gonna make a big star out of me.
Welcome back to Meet Me in the Movies. Noel T. Manning II here with Greg Tillman and Thomas Manning and Tim and Derek and anybody else who may be joining us.
I think that's it.
And to our studio audience, thank you. And if you do want to send us viewer mail, you can do that, info@c19.tv. Or you can comment wherever these shows are posted. There's our studio audience. They are here. We're good. I didn't see you guys over there. I'm glad that you
Some
were,
things never change.
glad that you were engaging and
You sure that's not an audience at home?
Maybe.
Like
It may be.
checking a webcam somewhere?
It may be. See if they've got that remote control in their hand. Well, Thomas, before the break, we teased the movie Heat, which Michael Mann directed. Got to work with Michael Mann back on Last of the Mohicans. He brought De Niro, Pacino together in this crime thriller action film, kind of all rolled into one. Val Kilmer's in this. Wes Studi from Mohicans is in this, along with Pacino, De Niro. Michael Madsen, I think, has a small role in this. So it's a film that's got a lot of names. There are a lot of people showing up in this, and it's filled with action almost from the beginning. You and I got a chance to. Your first time watching it, my time kind of revisiting this. So give me some of your thoughts on this film, and if you want to share anything about the story, go for it.
Oh yeah, so this is just one of those films where in certain scenes your jaw will literally drop to the floor. There's the highway, so it starts with a bank robbery, and it's like 10-minute scene from the bank robbery to this highway shootout, and it's one of the most well-directed action sequences I have ever seen. The way Michael Mann is able to command sound design is just out of this world, really.
Yeah, and he got an Oscar for sound from Mohicans, and so he really started kind of perfecting that around that time period. So you're talking about the early 90s. He started realizing there's some things we can do with sound to make it even better.
Yeah, so that scene stood out. There's also a point in the middle of the movie where Pacino he's the basically police lead detective. De Niro is the crime.
He's a crime boss.
Yeah,
basically.
crime boss that they're after, and they meet up in this diner or this restaurant in the middle of the movie and just talk back and forth for like 10 minutes. And that's another one of those scenes that's perfectly written, perfectly acted, perfectly directed, and it's just two people talking and completely different from this explosive highway shootout. But both of them are just as impactful, and that's the stamp of a good movie when a director is able to guide two completely different scenes like that, but make them just as incredible.
Yeah, and two different types. I mean, because when you're talking about dramatic dialogue, you've got to have the talent that can pull that off, but you've also got to have the dialogue to make it engaging, and this did, and it's one of the most memorable, shootouts on film that I've ever seen. Yeah. And going back and seeing it again just reminded me of how good Michael Mann is when he pulls his pieces together. He's not easy to work with.
Yeah, I remember hearing stories.
Not easy to work with, but man, what he ends up putting on screen, makes it, I guess, all worthwhile for anybody who can survive working with him. It is an amazing film. Sound design, the visuals, and that bank robbery actually inspired one of the Batman films.
Yeah, the opening of The Dark Knight when Joker's crew were committing the first bank robbery, and Nolan has gone on the record and said that he directly, his opening scene of that was directly inspired and influenced by the Heat bank robbery, and you can definitely watch them side by side and see a lot of similarities. And you can also, another thing that stood out was the musical score.
Yes.
It was a lot of ambiance, you can see that Zimmer Hans Zimmer was influenced by that
I
heavily
think
as
so.
well. Yeah, just building up suspense, and it's not like a melodic tune really,
Right.
but it's just there to create this feeling of tension.
Yeah, it was the score was very atmospheric.
Yeah.
And it really did. As we were watching it, I'm like, man, this sounds like something Zimmer has done in kind of his later years.
Well, The Dark
And
Knight had a soundtrack very similar to that.
absolutely,
Speaking
yeah.
of
And
that,
so especially watching that bank scene and hearing the way score was used, I'm like, am I
Yeah.
watching The Dark Knight?
Yeah, yeah.
And you realize just how much it probably did influence not just Zimmer, or not just Nolan, but Zimmer as well.
Yeah.
The cinematography was really gritty
Yeah.
as well, and I really loved that. And just so glad they got a chance to revisit this movie.
Yeah, the way Michael Mann is able to portray like the city of Los Angeles and the cityscape is really amazing. This and then Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx, those two films from him can, like, if you speak to people who actually live in Los Angeles and are familiar with the area, they're like, this is probably one of the most realistic portraits of the city that I've ever seen on film.
Yeah, and the storyline is really intricate too, because you've got family stories that are happening, including a daughter, Pacino's daughter, who is a young Natalie Portman.
She's like 13 years old.
Yeah, very young Natalie Portman, and I'd forgotten she was in this, but just such a solid film. One that is as relevant today and
Yeah.
holds up today.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been made today. That's how
Yeah.
good this was, and it was 95. And so, you know, my re-review of this, as far as a grade, still an A+, all these years later.
Yeah, it's an A+ for me as well, and I added it to my list of desert island films that it's like, if I only had like 5 movies to choose from to watch the rest of my life, this is one of
That's
them.
awesome.
we should do one of those sometime.
We ought to.
Visit out.
Yeah, we'll
we
do that.
did years ago an older version of this show. We should do that again.
We're talking about the art of cinematic sound, the impact of sound, and there's a new documentary called Making Waves, the art of cinematic sound, and this is a first-time director. She has been involved in sound design and sound editing going all the way back to the early 90s. She did sound for Armageddon. Oh gosh, what are the list of films? Do you have any of those, Thomas? The
sorry.
Rock.
Yeah.
The Rock was one of those
Yeah.
films that she did as well. She did a lot of those Jerry Bruckheimer type films.
Right.
And you know, when you think about those films, the visuals stand out, but also the sound.
Oh, yeah.
And this is her first attempt at doing a documentary. And she's been a professor of film at the University of Southern California for a number of years now. And you know, here she is taking the history of sound on film and putting it in the form of a documentary.
Yeah. So I was really impressed with the way they displayed how sound is half of the experience. Like, I think it was like, there was a quote from Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola who were like, without sound, there is no movie. It's 50% of, you can't get the impact of what's happening in the movie without the sound.
Right, the sound is just as important as the visuals.
Yeah, and it's like, this sound is basically the first sense that humans are able to, it's the first phenomenon they ever have when they're in their mother's womb.
Yes.
They hear like the heartbeat, and that's just how deeply ingrained it is in our psychology and our physicality, and that's why certain things in films stick out to us more than others.
Oh, absolutely.
As far as sound design goes.
Yeah, and today, I mean, our expectations for film is we've got to be immersed with the sound as well. It's not just what we're seeing on screen.
Yeah.
The sound is just as important. So if you go to a theater that's got the old school one speaker behind the screen, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be incredibly disappointed. And part of that is, you know, our home systems now are better than some theatrical experiences used to be. And the documentary is really amazing. It did get a nomination for the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards for Best First-Time Director. The way this unfolded, I think anybody that is a fan of cinema or any student of film needs to watch it, because she traced the entire history of it and did it in a way that was really captivating.
Yeah, and really enjoyed the way they displayed the intricacies of the sound designing department. It's not just like a singular sound designer. You've got like the dialogue editors, you have the ADR mixers, the Foley editors, then of course the score and the composer, and they're all working together, and they have to be working in like perfect symphony for it to all come together and get the final product that to have its most impact.
Yeah, she had, I think she said, over 200 hours of interview footage for this. She interviewed sound designers for Star Wars, but they were talking about where they came up with the effects and how that happened.
Right. Where can you see this?
It's available pretty much anywhere. Does have some theatrical run now. You can watch it video on demand as well, and it's been making the festival circuit. But I think anybody that loves film needs to watch this.
What movie, as many as you've seen over the years, where the sound had the biggest impression on you? I can think of something.
Well, go ahead and tell me which.
Earthquake.
Okay.
1974.
Yeah. Okay.
With Sense-Around.
Sense-Around.
When it first hit, it's like, wow, that's something I haven't felt before.
Yeah, Sense-Around was kind of the predecessor to the Dolby surround sound, and it was amazing because you're watching this earthquake. I remember that, and you're feeling it as well. Those
I think
early
just subwoofer, low decibel stuff that rattled the room and your seats and everything. It worked. It was interesting.
There are a lot of action films that make you feel it. I think you look at any of the Christopher Nolan films from the past few years, going back to the Dark Knight films. You watch those in the theaters, you feel it and experience it. Dunkirk. As much as the way that sound design annoyed some people, you felt you were there. And even Hunter Killer, which is a recent film I saw in theaters a year or so ago, did not do anything at the box office, but it's a submarine film, and I mean, you felt you were within the submarine and claustrophobic.
Saving Private Ryan.
I was thinking the same thing.
And Apocalypse Now as well, which I have not seen Apocalypse Now in its entirety, but from some of the research and some of the clips I've looked at, I know that revolutionized everything with sound design. And of course, Saving Private Ryan drew directly from that to create, I think that was like 19 years after Apocalypse Now. And so what Spielberg was able to do with that and the sound design was absolutely astounding.
Yeah, and sound design just keeps getting better, and the sound effects keeps getting better. One of the things that she does talk about in this, I'll just quickly say this, is studios used to have a bank of sound effects where every studio would just go to the screen.
The library.
The library. And that's all they would pull from, and it wasn't until later that somebody said, no, we've got to do better. We've got to do better. And then once that happened, it opened up a whole other branch of artists for film that focus on creating sound. But a solid A rating for me on this.
Oh yeah, I'm right there with you, solid A.
Okay, and I highly recommend checking that out. Well, let's dive to the quote of the week, and we will wrap this show up. This was also sent to us from the same guy, one of the same guys that commented on us earlier, Simon Says TV, said, why don't you use this quote of the week? So I'm going to. Lefty from Donnie Brasco said, wise guy is always right. Even when he's wrong, he's right. So until next time, I'm Noel T. Manning II for Thomas Manning, for Greg Tillman, and for Tim and Derek back there on the Tim Cam. We appreciate you.
Derek's taking a bow.
I thought he was taking a nap. So until next time, that is a wrap.